He doesn't hit you, but that doesn't mean you're not being abused. Today, we're going to talk about coercive control. Dr. Christine Cocchiola is going to dismantle the biggest myth in the abuse conversation that coercive control is just one type of abuse, but it's not. It is the entire playbook. She's going to unpack how abusers weaponize legal systems, religion, and even therapists to maintain power, how they regulate their emotions just enough to look like saints in public while psychologically dismantling their victims in private. And if victims finally speak up, they're called hysterical. They're told they're angry. They are dismissed or even worse, punished. This conversation is not for the faint of heart, but if you've ever felt invisible in your own marriage, or if you've been gaslit into silence by your church, your courtroom, or your own children, you need to hear this because understanding coercive control could be the difference between staying trapped and finally flying free. Today,
Wow.
I have with me Dr. Christine Cocchiola. She's an expert on the experiences of adult and child victims of coercive control. She's also a college professor who teaches social work, and she presents nationally and internationally on the concept of coercive control. And that is what we are going to be talking about today. So, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Let's just dive in by first defining what coercive control is. And I'm curious, how is coercive control different from other forms of abuse that we've talked about on this podcast, mainly emotional abuse, but also physical violence and maybe financial abuse? There's so many different types of ways that women can be abused. So tell us the difference and how would you define that?
Absolutely. I think there's actually a misnomer out there that's problematic. People see coercive control as a form of abuse, and even legislation calls it a form of domestic violence, and that's actually incorrect. It's actually the underpinning of it all. Why do
Yes,
people, right?
that makes sense.
Yeah, and so, but again, that's the narrative that's out there. And so I hope a big takeaway for your listeners is that if somebody's being emotionally abused or suffering physical violence or sexual violence, I always say it's the foundation of all isms. Think about racism, sexism. It's about one person or group of people exerting power and control over another person or group of people. People
Yes.
don't show up to relationships punching them. People show up to relationships coercing and controlling them, taking away boundaries, like infiltrating people's boundaries, creating a smaller world, which is isolation, intimidation. They gaslight people, they manipulate people, and then guess what? If that doesn't work really well, then yeah, you know what? I might punch you because that's exactly what happens if I can't control you in alternative ways, I'm going to use more physical experiences to do that. So, and the really interesting part is that if you're a savvy abuser, right? If you're someone who can emotionally regulate yourself, you're really great in front of a courtroom, you have a great career, you maybe are a school guidance counselor, everybody thinks you're wonderful. You have learned to regulate your emotions so well that you typically won't punch somebody. But you're going to use all of the other tactics, the financial abuse, the legal abuse, the weaponization of children. So again, the underpinning of it all is about coercion and control.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, what you're saying, I was going to ask you to give us some examples, but what you're saying is that abuse, that's what abuse is.
It
Abuse
is
is coercive control.
100%. And my very savvy, smart son says to me, Mom, why not just call it oppression? I mean, it's
Yes.
like
Well, it
it's
is.
like servitude. It's a taking away of liberty. It is a liberty crime when someone, I mean, we can think about all of the atrocities going on all over the world, all of the time. When you think about how this happens in micro systems in intimate relationships, 100%. But it happens in other systems, the meso systems. It happens in education. It happens in, of course, political arenas. It happens in policies, the macro systems. It happens in governments. Why is there war to obtain land or religious rights or all of these things? That's about people exerting power and control over other people that they think they are either, well, first of all, it's always about power. But sometimes it's about fame. Think about famous people who have done this, right? It's about gaining leverage. It's about fortune. It's about gaining money. We see this all the time with technological disasters. Somebody decides, oh, we're not going to shut down the BP oil drilling down in the Gulf of Mexico because if we shut down that, then we're going to lose money. So you know what we'll do? We'll just keep on pumping, even though we have signs that there's a faulty system, and then we totally erase a whole like generation of fishery down there. Like, like you understand, like it's
Yeah.
always about exerting power and control. It just happens sometimes behind closed doors.
Yes. And sometimes we can't always see it. And I love that there's actually an elevated awareness of this. It's I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just because of the social media accounts that I follow, but I'm seeing this um outcry more and more and more. And I
Mhm.
think it's so important that we understand it. And the now my audience are mostly Christian women, women of faith who are experiencing this in their marriages and in their churches. They're realizing, wow, I think this is actually going on in my church environment with
100%.
people who look like godly people on the outside. I love how you said there are some people who they're very good at regulating their emotions. They're very good at coming across like they're the one who's got it together and like they're the generous one and they're the one giving the benefit of the doubt. And they're actually what they're doing is using those skills to actually undermine and take power and control over. Really, it's a mind, you know what? It's like they're mind controlling people.
Feminist psychologists in the 70s were calling it psychological warfare. Albert
Yes.
Byron did research in 1957 on prisoners of war and was able to show how you can be a military man, strapping man in the military, prisoners of war, and you could be so eroded down that you would go from totally denying sharing military secrets to a total belief and confession that you actually had done something that you never did. This is men. This is not in a home where you're going to lose your house, your babies, like your like family won't like nobody can believe this person is this way. So, I did a TEDx and it's doing very well and it's I call it is all coercive control because the reality is that we have people talking about coercive control and saying it's the hidden abuse. It's not hidden. It's actually right in plain sight. And sometimes, by the way, well, what we know is so when we think about murders of women, which by the way, 35% of women suffer violence in their lifetime. If 35% of women suffer violence in their lifetime, how many are suffering non-physical forms of abuse that no
Yes.
one's reporting?
Yep.
I think that's got to be close to 70. And how many children are living in these homes? And my particular niche is children. So, that being said, when women are murdered, are they murdered in a senseless act of like retaliation or aggression, or is it like maybe defense, or are they murdered because someone could no longer control them the way that they wanted to control them? So
Yeah.
coercive control is beyond the violent incident model. It's everything.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in spiritual world, I see this all the time with my clients where, you know, unfortunately, God and being a good person can often be manipulated by powerful people and this is why we know women suffer this at a greater rate because women are taught in general, our society, well, first of all, we're innately born to be caretakers. Biologically, you can't take that away from us.
Mhm.
And then we live in a society that fosters that. And then take, ethnicities, right? People's certain cultural beliefs that also foster that. I was just on a call with a woman from the Philippines, and she's like, if I leave, my family will hate me. They will discard me because of Catholicism and the way that she has been groomed to behave, and the family system believes it's like a traitor in the family system. And then add in that this is the world we live in. Society has women are expected to behave a certain way.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. Wow. Okay, so let's talk about language. Why why is language so important? You brought up the fact that coercive control is often thought of as a form of abuse and not really understanding that it actually encompasses all abuse. How do words and narratives get weaponized by abusers to maintain control? And
Mhm.
what role does our language play in reinforcing this whole thing?
Well, that's an interesting, I love that question. So I think there's quite a few things. I think in general, what we are seeing, and we do know this happens with all laws, right, is that abusers are, I think, I'm going to step back. I think the most, I just talked to 400 judges in Texas about coercive control. And the reality is that what we're missing is a conversation about the pathology of abusers. Who are these people who perpetrate this abuse? Because listen, I was married to one for 27 years and 11 months. They show up as charlatans. And I've been doing this work for 37 years. I started at 19. Do the math.
Wow.
The reality is that I didn't even see it in my own home. Now, because I didn't suffer physical violence, right? I used to
Yeah.
say if he would just hit me, it would all
Yeah.
make sense, right? But it's all coercive control, physical violence or not, it's all coercive control. So, we live in a world where the people are not really understanding that this abuse shows up in very insidious ways, often initially. It can show up as love. As a matter of fact, love bombing is now part of coercive control legislation in the UK. Can you believe it?
Wow. That's
So how
amazing.
it is. So how do we understand the pathology of abusers? Talk about operational definitions, right? And how do we understand the impact on children growing up in these family systems? Because I'll tell you what, if I grew up in this family system, my chances of being a victim of abuse are extremely elevated, and my chances of identifying with an aggressor and taking on the traits, maybe not all of them, but taking on the traits of an abusive person are elevated. Are you kidding me? We could end world like problems if we actually understood what's going on in family systems and then in the meso systems and the macro systems. So we need to really operationally define who is an abuser. How do they become an abuser? What to look for in your courtroom, in the police station, when the police arrive at the door and the victim has called the police and the abuser has a scratch because he took her phone open, right? So now she wants her phone back 'cause she's maybe recording him or has texts that journals, she's journaling, she's keeping things safe and she scratches him. And now who's the victim?
Yeah. Yep. Oh,
He actually, so stats regarding men, I know there's male victims. I have male clients. Many of them are gay. They are in relationships with other men. But
mhm.
I do know what happens to men. However, the stats are totally incorrect. It is not 1 in 8 men that suffer domestic abuse. It is not. The reality is there are many men who are using the system and co-opting it to your point and saying they are now victimized. We have coercive control legislation here in the state of Connecticut. It's the strongest piece of legislation. We have a mother whose children, all three of them, were taken from her and then they fled, but they knew they couldn't go to her because he has a restraining order against her. He won a restraining order against her. They fled to a friend's house. He took her to court and said that she is the coercive controller.
Oh my God.
This is the system we're living in.
Absolutely tragic. Oh my gosh. Okay, so well let's talk about that then. Let's talk about the abusers and their pathology and how we define what an abuser actually is. How do they inflict their harm? How can people recognize who is the real abuser and who's the one that's being victimized?
Wow, I love that one because trauma can show up in a variety of ways, right? Yeah. So, and I do a particular training. It's a course of control professionals training because I want professionals to understand what is the difference. So victims and survivors often show up dysregulated and frankly don't always behave in a way that we might think is appropriate. But ask yourself, after years, months, days of suffering, someone trying to control you, it's kind of like a percolating coffee pot. Eventually, It might just be one little pebble and you might explode. And that is exactly when everyone's going to look at you and say, look at what you did.
Yes.
Versus what we know the definition of coercive control is a pattern of behavior to erode away a victim's autonomy. And so nobody looks at the patterns. Nobody, for me, I work a lot in family court situations. Nobody looks at the parental subsystem. If we took two parents and we put them side by side, was in from the very get-go who had more power and control. If that person had more power and control, you had better believe they're going to fight for more custodial time, even if they never gave a damn about the children
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
You better believe they're going to fight to not have to pay as much money. You better believe that they are going to behave in a way where they start to weaponize the children overtly and make the children feel discomfort with the safe parent. These are all the tactics. It's not hard to see if you look at the relational dynamics in the family system, but people don't do that. And of course, judges aren't trained to do that, but for God's sakes, get trained.
Yeah, right, right. Well, and I'm just thinking, even when I went to my church, so this is after decades of 2 decades of dealing with those patterns, those exact patterns that you're describing. And by the time after 2 decades, now I'm mad. I'm mad because I can't figure it out. I can't solve the problem. It's impacting my kids. It's impacting my mental health. And I'm angry because nobody will help me. Everyone that I tried to reach out to wouldn't help. Nobody was looking at the patterns. But now that I'm angry and I'm presenting like this, like, you need to listen to me now. This is absolutely out of control. That because of that energy that I brought to the table, they actually, everyone turned that on me then and made it seem like and I was like, if you look at the last 20 years of my life, who has been showing up, serving in the church, raising my kids basically like a single parent, showing up, bringing my kids to the doctor, doing all of these things, none of that mattered. None of that
No.
mattered. It was only that point of, I love that percolating coffee thing. It was that point of eruption that was the only thing that mattered to anybody else. And it didn't matter. And I'm a writer. I was writing stuff down and keeping track, and none of that mattered. No one cared about any of that. They just
Well,
didn't like my anger about
right.
it.
No, exactly. Exactly. So I love that, here you are, like finally, like really, when you think about how long it takes a victim to come forward or how many times they come forward, and you finally have the ability, the strength, and that strength, by the way, is fortified with anger. The anger
Yes.
needed to be there to give you the
Yes.
strength.
Exactly. Exactly.
If you don't get pissed off, excuse me, sorry, but if you don't get really angry at some point, then you're going to continue to be subjugated. And that's really what subjugation is about, right? Subjugation is about this idea that we are so worried about other people being hurt by our boundaries that we don't put them up, but we also are afraid that they are upset with us, right?
Yeah.
And so that's subjugation, and that's the percolating coffee pot. And over time, resentment builds. And it could be the littlest thing that sets us off. But when a woman shows up emotional, a woman is treated very differently than a man when she's emotional. And so, Kate Mann coined the word himpathy
Mhm.
because men get an inordinate amount of sympathy when they are troubled or having a challenging time, and they can be angry and punch a hole in the wall. But the moment a woman is a little over the top, she is hysterical. You know where the word hysteria comes from, right?
I think I've heard this before, but you tell us.
Yeah, so it comes from the Greek word uterus, which Freud created when women would come and complain about their husbands harming them, and he began to call them hysterical. So, yeah, so there is so much layering of patriarchy here.
Hmm.
And then add in, of course, to your point, religion, right? Which actually, there are many obviously wonderful parts of religion, but there are also patriarchal norms that are embedded in every single religion.
That's right.
And so, it's a huge problem when so a victim has to prove they're innocent, but a perpetrator doesn't have to prove that they're innocent.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. When I have people, some once in a while, someone will reach out and go, I would listen to your podcast, but you seem so angry. I don't know how I come across angry in my podcast, but when they do that, I'm just like, I am. I'm angry as hell. That's why I do a podcast. That is literally why I do everything I do, because there is an anger and a rage inside of me about all of this crap that's going on. There's a great song by Sarah Bareilles called If I Dare. And
Hmm.
there's a line in it that says, you don't have to listen, but you'll hear me. Mark my words.
Oh, I
And that
love
was
it.
what, when I walked away from my church, that became my mantra. You don't, fine. You don't have to listen, but you're going to hear me. Mark my words. And I went out and started doing what I'm doing now. And I don't think I'm ever going to stop, because I mean, the day that my anger over what's happening to women and children in this world stops is the day that I'm dead.
Yeah. For me, it always makes me, I think I'm really angry, but it makes me so distressed
Yeah.
that it's something like so domestic violence. I'll use the words in the research, but domestic violence is the number one killer for African American women to ages 15 to 35. How are we not
Oh my gosh.
discussing this?
Yeah.
How? If I told you the amount of cases I have, the amount of mothers I know where family court and these dynamics in the parental subsystem, the two parents, their subsystem in the family, that those dynamics have exposed child predators. It's a free access. If you're a sexual predator, and if 1 in 3 girls before the age of 18 are sexually abused, and 1 in 6 boys, and biological fathers are the number one perpetrators, this is the highway. This is the gateway to gain access. You and I are in a great relationship. I love you. I'll perpetrate on our children, or I'll perpetrate on your children from another relationship. And if you leave me, I'll get custody because I'm going to tell the court that you are alienating me from my children. I'm going to use the words parental alienation, and I'm going to you tell the court you're an alienator when actually our child has had, I have a mom right now, child had 5 UTIs in a month. The pediatrician told her to get a restraining order. She lost custody.
Because she tried to get a restraining order?
She got the restraining order, and when the hearing happened, the father said she was an alienator and making it up and that she was crazy, that she was making up stories. She lost custody.
That is absolutely terrifying.
This is my world. This is what every single day, every single mother, it's either sexual abuse, it's physical abuse, it's always the covert, coercive control. Your mother doesn't love you. She was never around for us. The betrayal trauma that these children are experiencing constantly is just, and that creates first of all, whether it's sexual abuse or not, or physical abuse or not, significant anxiety. It creates an inability to have agency in my own life. It creates more maladaptive coping. I either fawn, I'm subjugated a lot in life, or I fight,
Yeah.
or I disassociate from the world and I pretend nothing's wrong. But the bottom line is I do that. How do I disassociate? With substances. I
Yeah.
mean, with
Yeah.
self-harm, I mean, the, I do believe the crux of our problems are related to family system perpetrators.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. My gosh. How do you get up every day? I just,
Because,
I mean,
because, because this is also, by the way, the most thankful work.
hmm,
When you give a mother guidance on how to protect her child from the predator, when you tell her I have a protective parenting program, and people learn to be a therapist with these children who are so dysregulated, behaving horribly. And when you begin to implement different skills, as you have to see it, you have to be able to say, whoa, this is what's going on. I call it the 10,000 foot view, right? I have a lot of friends who have husbands who are pilots. So you look down and you're like, okay, I know exactly what he's doing. I know exactly what I have to do. This is really painful for me. I'm a trauma victim, but you know what? The most healing part of my life, and me personally, has been healing those two babies behind me. That's the most, how, how do we get better? We get better when we know that our children are okay, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's focus on the
I can't.
kids a little bit more.
It just
I
starts
know,
the crying. Start.
um, gosh, this is so important though. I'm so glad you're here talking about it. How does coercive control impact children? And because again, especially, I'm thinking especially of the ones whose dads are subtle, who come across like good dads who do good things. And the children crave their dad's attention. They crave to be around their dad. They crave his approval. And he provides that most of the time, but it could be intermittent or it could be, I don't know, there's so many ways. I feel like, even I deal with a lot of women post divorce whose ex-husbands are doing this to their children after the divorce is over, and the children are taken in by it. Even adult children get taken in by their dad's fraudulent
Mhm.
persona. And
Well,
the
right.
and the woman who is still dealing with trying to heal from the trauma of her mind being violated over and over and over again for sometimes decades is now dealing with the fallout, watching her children go through this as well.
100%. So what we talk about in like the clinical world, so I'm a therapist, right? I've studied child development. What we know is that these abusers are omnipresent. They're always there even when they're not there, right? They've
Mm,
made themselves be like always present, right? And some children fear the abuser, okay? Overtly. Let me say that again. Some children fear the abuser overtly. All children fear the abuser.
yes. Oh gosh, I'm so glad you said that. It's
Yes.
true. That's why they're doing so much of the things that they're doing.
100%. So whether the abuse is over, like if I don't do what dad wants, right? Or if I don't, whether the abuse is overt or it's covert, there's a dysregulation in the child. They have learned at a very young age to watch the room, to
Yeah.
feel the room, to feel what their mother is feeling or their whoever the abuser is, right? They have learned to feel that in their body and they regulate their behaviors as a result of that. So then you take like so the all abusers are authoritarian. When I say that to your listeners, I just want to be sure they know like that's like Hitler, like a totalitarian ruler, right? Everybody in the family knows we kind of got to do what he says. We kind of got
Hmm.
to do it. All right? Maybe we can pacify him a little bit, but overall we better do what that person wants.
Hmm.
And of course, children thrive with authoritative parenting, which rhymes with give, where there's more choice, they get agency, etc. But what abusers often do is even if they've started off authoritarian, which is the scary dad, the bear in the home, right? The wolf in the home, even if they've started off that way, they figure out, see, they're savvy. They figure out by age 10, 11, 12, tweens and teens, oh, wait a minute. If I start to be permissive, oh, hook, line, and sinker, I've got this child baited. Because what do tweens and teens want? More freedom, access to more goods and services, even young adults, all of them. So the abuser, I have a YouTube, it's called in the podcast called my podcast is called Perfect Prey, but my I have a YouTube episode called The Lure of Tweens and Teens. Because they literally lure them in then. They might have been really scary and frightening for a long time. And we'll talk about the guy who isn't, but they might have been. And then all of a sudden they switch. They're still scary and frightening on the down low. But now this kid knows, wait a minute, I don't have to come home at 12 o'clock. My mother makes me come home at 12 o'clock. I'm 16 years old and I have a 12 o'clock curfew. Are you kidding me? My father lets me stay out till whenever. My father supplies me my weed. My father gives me a car. My father lets me take the car even though I had bad grades. My father doesn't care what my grades are, or my father cares very much what my grades are, and I'm going to get an A, but because of that, I'm going to be rewarded in a way that is beyond, it's not. It's an external reward. It's not an internal reward, right? And
Yeah.
that's what happens with these children is they learn to look externally for validation instead of internally, which really creates a competency issue in their growth. So, how can I be competent to speak in front of a crowd when the only way I've ever felt good is if I've been rewarded for doing whatever it is in the family system? And I've been rewarded in a way that has subverted the protective parents' parenting in
Yes.
every single dynamic. So that's the scary guy. Now take the fun guy. Well, he never was authoritarian. And then you have a protective parent who's trying to create structure and boundaries, and maybe it's time to get a part-time job, or you need to, you need to clean up your room, or let's clean up the dishes after dinner, whatever it is. And that permissive parent is like, oh, you don't have to do that. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And again, what is the goal? The goal is to take away competence. And competence leads to an inability to have agency. If I don't feel competent in the world, I don't have voice. I don't have the ability to assert what I need. I certainly don't have boundaries. And guess what? I'm more easily controlled. That's a slam dunk for an abuser. Take away a
Yeah.
child's ability to be competent in the world, which takes away their ability to have agency. Guess what? I can get them to do whatever I want.
Yeah, gosh, this is so good. Okay, what about a dad who is really passive? Like
Hmm.
just I mean,
Not
there's some
engaged.
elements of what'd you say?
Not engaged, really.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, not engaged. I mean, engaged when they are too loud, when the kids are too loud, or when they're bothering him or interfering with what he wants to do, but but otherwise not engaged at all. And yet there still is a fear in the kid. Like I'll just give you an example in my real life. Like there, for example, one of my kids won't go, he doesn't want to do his homework at dad's house. So he wants to make sure he does his homework with me at my house, but not at dad's house. Now I have my theories about why that is, but I can't prove anything. But there is like this visceral fear in this 13-year-old that he can't do homework over there. And yet his dad is extremely passive and blows up on rare occasions.
my question is your child afraid that maybe they need help with homework?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you better not ask me for help, right?
Well, he
So,
will he will help his kids though.
but he'll
It's
get
just but it's he gets very on edge and
they're afraid.
it becomes a thing. Yeah.
Right, right. You're safer. It's safer to get homework done with you. With dad, I know there's going to be some kind of a reaction. And honestly, when you were starting to describe it before you said it was your situation, I was saying that's actually sometimes the best case scenario. And the reason for that, out of all of the abusers,
Yeah.
and it's a horrible situation, no doubt about it. I'm not trying to minimize, but in that, the child actually knows you're safer to do the homework with, right? And
Yeah.
the child also knows that that other parent, it's pretty clear, isn't really there for them.
Yeah.
So versus the abuser's like, oh, I'll do your homework with you, and this child you're speaking of knows pretty clearly that dad is not reliable. The other problem with this is that at your child's core, they know that dad does not love them unconditionally, that they are not valuable. So what abusers like to show us, and they did it with the adults, is that we're not valued in the family system. We don't matter. Mothers don't matter, maybe. Maybe it's that overt, but also like, yeah, no, we're not important. And they teach children that they're not important, sometimes overtly, always covertly. In your case, it's overt. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. That's
I'm
so
not important to
interesting.
dad. My schoolwork's not important. My dad gets angry if I have a question or if it takes up too much time away from maybe something we're supposed to do. It's pretty overt, but that is a betrayal to a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll give you another little example. I'm only giving these examples because I feel like there's other people like me out there where it's more subtle. It's not as obvious. And they always, I feel like I am able to help those people the most, probably because that's my experience. But so one of my kids, I found a recording. He was 10 at the time, and he came home and he was telling me, Dad, he was crying and saying, Dad doesn't love me. I know Dad doesn't love me. And we were trying to get to the bottom of it. We couldn't get to the bottom of it. He got very upset the more questions I asked, so I needed to back off. But I had him listen to that. It's several years later now. He's an older teen. And I had him listen to that. And I said, do you remember when you said this? Because he gets along great with his dad now. And there was all kinds of problems before. And he goes, no, I don't remember that at all. And I said, do you remember like not wanting to go over there and like being afraid? And he's like, no, Dad's great now. And so, and has been the pattern. It's like they get into just like you said, they're into their tween and teen years. Now, their dad is not giving them extra freedoms or anything like you described, but they still feel safer over there now because I think because he's not as irritated with them.
He's figured out to turn down the volume.
Yeah,
I
yes.
call it a volume. Like they might start off as a 10 and like intensity, and now he's figured out, oh, you know why? Because he has more control over them. That's really
Well,
why.
and all of the other kids, I had 9 children, all of the older kids, they all have great relationships with him now. Now they do. Yeah. And they it's like they are aware that he's got issues, but they just want to, they're good kids. They're good kids. They just want to have a relationship with dad. They actually initiate with him. They make sure that when it's his turn to have the younger kids for a holiday, they make sure they go over there and spend time over there on the holiday. They go out of their way to make sure that he is taken care of. And
Well,
it just
because
blows my mind.
well, he's the connoisseur victim, isn't he? He needs attention. He needs everyone to take care of him. He needs
Yeah.
everybody to rescue him. And so this is what abusers do. And it's really interesting because children become their number one rescuers after us, right? We no longer are there, so they turn to our children. You have a whole family of children, right? And it seems to
Yeah.
me, I guess I just want to be. So one of the things that I coach my protective parents on is that, and it's so ironic because I literally just made a video before our call that said 3 things you need to know about the abuser. One, they do not love your children. They never
Yeah.
did.
I believe that. I
Right,
100% believe that.
right, right. And so, the reality is that we do a great job of trying to protect our children from the abusive behavior. But actually, we're doing too much work. We need to let the kids feel the pain
Yeah.
because when we don't let them feel the pain, they actually, I call it disintegrated intuition. They actually become disintegrated from their intuition. Their body was telling them, your son who doesn't want to do his homework at his dad's, his body is telling him, this doesn't feel safe. I don't want to, this doesn't feel good to me. You're better doing it here. His body's telling him. And imagine, not that you do this, but imagine a mother saying, no, you have to do your homework at your dad's. I don't have to sit here every night and do homework with you. Do it at your dad's. What have we just done? We have asked our child to walk into the wolf's den,
Yeah.
and we're told them, your dad's there for you to do it. He's good at math. Have him help you. We have disintegrated their intuition. It's actually gaslighting, but I don't call it gaslighting because gaslighting has malicious intent. Our intent is
Yeah.
not to be malicious.
Yeah.
Our intent is to maybe help. We want to believe this person is actually decent.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and and I don't believe in black and white thinking. Black and white thinking is extremely harmful. The only time black and white thinking works is with these individuals because victims and survivors are so kind and giving, and we want to believe the best in people. They chose us because of that. They didn't choose some person on the street who was going to be like, no way, I'm not dealing with that. They chose someone who is that. We have research that affirms it. We are highly agreeable. We are conscientious. Ask your listeners to take the Big Five personality test. I bet you they score high in agreeableness and conscientiousness.
Hmm.
Abusers score very low in agreeableness and very high in neuroticism. They get neurotic and obsessive about creating pain. So the reality is that we work hard. And then we work hard to protect our children. We don't want them to believe this person is a bad person. This is where black and white thinking is necessary.
Yeah.
That person has is characterologically disordered. They are harmful, they are manipulative, they are gaslighting, they intimidate, they isolate, and they did it when you were 5, 8, 10, 12, and maybe they're on better behavior now, but they are still the same person. And so, I always tell my children, listen, any relationship you want, as long as there's boundaries and it's not in a private space, because I don't trust that person in a restaurant or something like that. At this point, they're not there, but the point is that I don't prevent it, but I also call, as we say, my dad always says, I call a spade a spade. That
Yes.
is a black spade.
Yep. Yep, that's so interesting. I come out of a family of origin where now I look back and I really believe my mom was had some issues and she was emotionally abusive. And I instinctively knew that if you stepped out of line, you would get in trouble, but I didn't. I didn't step out of line. I stayed.
Mhm.
So I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what would happen. I just had this feeling. And then several years ago, I did. I stepped out of line by exposing a couple of things. And that was the last time I've ever talked to her. She and my sisters, both, everyone in the family, my dad had already passed away, cut me off. And that's how I knew. And
Mhm.
once I saw it, even though every part of me wanted to not believe that this is true, I had to go into what you're just talking about, black and white thinking. I had to just make conscious, and I have to keep making that decision.
Oh,
Like,
so hard.
no, this happened. I knew this all along. I knew it all along. And I
Mhm.
am not going to throw myself under the bus anymore. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be happy to have a relationship again if there was an awakening, but with these kinds of people, there is never going to be an awakening. There isn't.
No, and too many victims and survivors wait for that
Yeah,
awakening, in particular in partnerships, which is, I mean, I certainly did.
yeah.
I met him when I was 16, so I was with him 35 years. And to your point, I'm so sorry you experienced that in your family of origin, but I want your listeners to know I didn't. I came from a loving, my parents are 64 years married this October. Amazing. Like my siblings and I
Oh,
joke about how adorable and loving they are and how loving they were to us. It wasn't perfect. It
that
wasn't
is
perfect,
wonderful.
but the setup was that I didn't know what red flags were in an
Sure.
abusive relationship. I only knew green flags, number one, and number two, I was like I was like a fawn, like literally, like
Yeah.
everybody's nice, so why not? Everybody's nice, right? Isn't
Yep.
everybody nice? Isn't the world filled with good people? I mean, right? I mean,
Yep. Yep. No, I can totally see it happening both ways. Because I mean, in my family, I would have told you back when I got married the first time that my family was perfect and amazing and a wonderful Christian family.
Hmm,
That's what I would have told you. So, but
interesting.
but yours actually was, and
Is
yet you
yeah.
still it doesn't matter either way. We were both very naive and went into the whole thing just believing the best about people and wanting to just give and make ourselves vulnerable and build a beautiful life with somebody. And we just believed that of course that's going to happen.
Well, Sandra Brown calls them super traits. We really, truly do. I mean, if the world were made up, we're not perfect, believe me, right? But if the world were made up of people like us, we wouldn't have war,
No,
frankly.
nope.
I mean, we wouldn't have these types of world problems. I don't know if it's Iceland right now that has more females in power than anywhere else. And like literally, it might be Iceland. It's definitely a
It's a
country around.
Scandinavian country. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking
and they've
about.
gotten
Yeah.
rid of like poverty, like crime. Like, I'm sorry.
You know
I
what
don't,
it is? It's that people like us, we can see our perspective, yes, but we can also see another person's perspective and we care about it. And so even if that person turns out to be an abuser, like I can think of the abusers in my life, I think I care about their perspective. I care that they're stuck in that body. I care that they think these things, but now I also have had to learn I have to start caring about my perspective too. My perspective also counts. And there
Mhm.
has to be a place and if it's going to have a good relationship, there has to be a place where both people care about both perspectives so that you can work together mutually to, come together and work through things. And that is never, ever going to happen with an abuser because they do not see from anyone else's perspective. They can't. They can't. And that's why they don't change. If anyone's listening to this and thinks, well, my guy can change, I'm telling you, I and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but he can't. If he's an abuser, he cannot change and he will not change. And you can send him to whatever, however many, you know, retreats or men's abuse recovery programs that you want to. And yes, they can learn the new masks to put on to look better, but they're also being equipped with more language and more information and more manipulation skills to more covertly control, coercively control you in ways that are more under the radar that you may or may not miss at that point. But they're not going to ultimately change.
Right. And I think like that is so important, that part of the conversation, because I think, first of all, victims need to realize that there is a such thing as trauma bonding, where our brain literally, they can see on MRIs, has neurological responses to the intermittent reinforcement, the good parts. And
Yeah.
so we hold on to those good parts, thinking that actually that's who the person is. And that's actually performative to lure you in. Then you might say, well, he's not an abuser. Like, I mean, he does this or he does that. Ask yourself, are you being called names? Simple things. Like, does he call you a name every once in a while when he's angry? Does he mock you? Does he call you a name you don't like, by the way? Even if it's something that you agreed on 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right? Are you feeling like you're not seeing your loved ones as much, or your family and friends? Have your friends changed? Your world is getting smaller. Like, these are really important questions, because abuse, again, doesn't have to be overtly evident to everybody in the world. And you need to ask yourself, and I ask victims and survivors all the time, I want you to sit for a moment and I want you to write. And this is called, I call it re-traumatization theory. Like, literally sit down and write down all of the horrible things he's done. Okay? That's going to traumatize you. But that is your reminder of who he is and what he's capable of. And every time you're like, oh, maybe he's not that bad. We had a good dinner out last week. I want you to go back to that list. I want you to slam it into that's the breaking of the trauma bond, is an awareness that there is a pattern of behavior that continues to happen. Some of your listeners might say, well, he does show me empathy. Well, that's called cognitive empathy. Abusers have an ability to actually intellectualize empathy. They know how to behave if somebody passes away, or if you're sad about something, they might be able to give you some support in that period of time. The question is are they able to affectively
Mhm.
empathize with you in a way that feels very attuned to you, not just once, but all the time? And if
Yes.
they aren't capable of doing that all the time, they are a cognitive empathizer. And that cognitive empathy is a cover. So people like to say these abusers don't know how to empathize. That's wrong. They do. They actually are really good at cognitively empathizing, of taking up the torch for something that may draw attention to them in a good way. And then we get tricked by that. We get fooled by that. And then, I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, yeah, when they move on to someone else, yeah, they're going to be happier. You know why? Because they get better at their job. That's why.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. I just want to point out something else too, because some women, especially some Christian women who maybe grew up in Christian homes where, maybe their personality is very compliant, but then they also have that religious programming that says, yes, this is very godly. They may be in a relationship where they don't ever rock the boat, but they instinctively know that, like they would never do that because there is some danger there, right? But it's easier for them not to rock the boat because it comes more naturally to them. But if you ask yourself, what if I did say no to that? What if I did say, I would actually like to go to a different restaurant, or I would actually like to paint the wall a different color, or I would actually like to, move, not, I don't want to buy this house. I'd rather buy a different house. If you say that, what's going to happen? And if you don't know, try it and see. And that's how you can know, those little things are going to be the giveaways that your husband is not actually as wonderful as you think he is. He's only nice because you're in his
Accommodating.
control.
You're accommodating.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
accommodate and everything's fine. You don't accommodate and things get a little bit awry. And frankly, maybe this is a great question for your listeners. How many of your listeners are actually suffering with autoimmune illnesses?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
when we are constantly accommodating other people and subjugating ourselves over and over and over again, that lives within the body and
Yep.
creates all kinds of ailments. So ask yourself, is that hip issue a hip issue? Or is that, the fact that you're suffering from, maybe your Lyme disease hasn't gone away, or you have other chronic fatigue or chronic illnesses? Ask yourself, is that because you literally never ever get to voice how you truly feel? That's a problem. That leads to early death, by the way. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Which is
yeah,
why I always say this, any kind of abuse, even if he's never hit you, it's still physical abuse because your body is absolutely being impacted in profound ways. You just can't
100%.
see it. You can't see it on the outside.
100%. That's why I like using coercive control as the underpinning of it all. And if you identify you're suffering coercive control, it is creating every single illness that we know occurs with any abuse because, again, it aligns. Think about people who suffer racism. I mean, how the intergenerational trauma of being harmed in such a significant way as a result of the color of your skin and how that creates long-term impact generation after generation after
Yes.
generation,
Yes,
right? This is the same idea.
yeah, and that I've heard that it actually gets passed down in your DNA. Your
It does.
DNA changes and gets
Mhm.
passed down to your children and their
Absolutely.
children. It's
Absolutely.
yeah, wow.
Mhm.
Okay, so what can protective parents do? And what kinds of mistakes do they make? I
Oh.
mean, I've made mistakes in trying to protect my kids and protected them in the wrong ways, I think. And I'd like to talk about that too for people who want to avoid some of those same mistakes and what is appropriate and what is the best way to protect our kids.
Sure. So I think, there's a variety of things. I say that to protective parent, I could talk about this subject for an hour, and I know we have an hour. So I would say that the best therapists for our children are their safe, protective parent. The problem is that
Wow.
sometimes children go to therapy and the therapist will inadvertently gaslight them into believing that their father, mother, whoever the abuser is, does love them, that they're just a little angry, or maybe so we teach children to actually believe that an abusive person isn't abusive. And we actually want them to repair relationships with them. And we tell victims all the time to leave, yet we force children into custodial time with an abuser. I mean, could you even like that
Yeah.
like blows my mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
what can we do? Remember that every single moment you have with your children, you're not parenting the same children. Children who live in this type of family system have suffered unacknowledged child abuse, period, in some form or another. It can be overt or covert, but it is a psychological trauma that research shows us over and over again is the most elusive type of trauma and the most unidentified type of trauma.
Hmm.
So the first thing I would ask all protective parents to do is to literally armor up for that idea that your child actually is being abused. Even if they never talk to the abuser, even if they're sharing halftime, even whatever it is, they are actually actively being abused. Because gaslighting, manipulation, intimidation, and isolation are abusive behaviors. They're tactics used by abusers. I would also say that a lot of these kids get dysregulated and overwhelmed, and then we are actually acting as if they're a typical kid, and they're not. Like,
Hmm.
again, look through the course of control lens. Treat your child as if they walked in the door after a visit and they're misbehaving or they won't empty the dishwasher and all these things. And it's not that they don't need to have, structure and boundaries in place, but what if they walked in the door with 1,000 paper cuts? How would you treat them?
Right.
Their brains are actually actively being broken every time they go off to the abuser's house. And your goal is to, because when we try to take away abusers attachment to what's healthy, to good things, we are fracturing the brain's ability to regulate, to create human connection, to cognitively process. We are fracturing in a variety of different ways. Every time your child comes home, your job is to reignite and fortify an attachment with you. And that means looking at them differently, understanding that they're suffering, understanding their behaviors are not them oftentimes. It's a recording. They're being told to behave a certain way, understanding that it's living in their body and they need a place to exert it. Um, and and also just now responding differently. Like, wait a
Mhm.
minute, that kid has 1,000 paper cuts, or that kid has a broken brain. How am I going to treat them? How am I going to parent differently? And that's exactly the work that I specifically do. How do we parent differently these children? And then what we're doing is really, again, reigniting what kids need more than anything is a secure attachment to a healthy parent. And
Yeah.
we're reigniting exactly what the abuser is trying to eradicate. And we do that with positive memories. We we truly just understand that they are not their chronological age in all aspects. Developmentally, they've been compromised. You might have an 18-year-old and you're like, gosh, they're spoiled brat. They're acting like they're 12. Well, that's because actually developmentally, their brain reverts back to some of that dysregulated behavior. And so
Yeah.
treat them like that. And the more that you meet them where they are, and you co-regulate with them instead of react to them, the more we co-regulate, the more that they can settle and feel safe and can actually begin to grow and get healthy when they're with us. And then when they go back to the abuser, you're going to have to do it all over again. And the
Yeah.
more that you are consistently able to do it, the healthier they will become. I actually have a children's book coming out every moment of every day, and it's for children who don't want to go with the abuser. And how do we help them regulate in their body? Because that's our role is to understand that they are suffering abuse every moment that they are with that abuser. And
Yeah.
until we actually rip that band-aid off and acknowledge that, we are not helping them. And the systems don't even get it. The systems, they're so far behind.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, well, first of all, I'm so interested in your book. When is that coming out?
I hope October. I'll have the cover and I'll be posting it on social media in the next week or so. And I don't know when this recording is going out, but I'll be doing that shortly. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
this is going out in November, so it will be
Okay, so the
ready. We'll
book will be out.
definitely. Oh
The
yeah. Oh,
book
I'm
will be
so
out.
excited
Yes.
about that.
It's a children's book. Yep.
Okay, so I guess I'm wondering like I think some parents are, I mean, I can kind of hear them talking in their brains are saying, I don't know if I can do that. I feel triggered myself when my child gets dysregulated. And maybe they haven't had the support that they need to, someone to co-regulate with them, or maybe their therapist is actually like what I experienced so many times. I was actually re-traumatized by different therapies. And so maybe they haven't had a safe place. They What is your thoughts on just them doing their own healing as well in order to be able to provide that safe place for their kids?
100%. And I probably have to get off in a moment. So,
Oh, okay.
I have a 2 o'clock. I hope that's
No,
okay.
that's totally fine. We can end it
Okay.
quickly.
So I would always say that we always have to be working on our own trauma, right? And getting as much support as possible. And the more that we're able to regulate ourselves and understand our experiences, the more that we can be there for our children. I also kind of describe it as being an actress on stage. So this was happening to me during
Mm,
COVID. And the kids were coming to my house periodically, if at all, and then they started coming more, thankfully. But the point is I was like pretending that like I wasn't mom anymore. I was therapist. And when they were coming home, I was actually treating them the age that I thought that they were, and more like
Okay.
maybe my girlfriend's child, because I had to act because my brain, and that's what we know about the brain is so compromised from trauma that it gets into a rotation and it doesn't know how to get off unless we trick it. We actually have to trick our brain. And so tricking your brain into believing that you're safe, well, the only way to do that is to actually create a theater a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And pretend. And then the more that you do that, actually, it's so remarkable. I wish I could talk about this. The more we do that, the more our brain heals. And
Yeah.
of course, the more that we're performing like that, the more our children's brains heals. So there's a
Okay.
lot there.
Okay. Really quick before you go, tell us where they can find you if they want to, because I want to find, I know you on Instagram, but I want to know more about like how can I connect with you more?
Sure. So Coercive Control Consulting is my website, but also it's called I Know Your Heart. You can find it by just putting in iknowyourheart.com
Okay.
because protective parents know their children's hearts better than anyone. And then I have a protective parenting program and I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. And I also have if you have any professionals listening who want to get trained, I have a 14 CE training program for professionals because we need more professionals doing this work. After they do that, they get on my website. If they are a therapist, they get on my website, really just trying to push it all out there. And of course I
Okay.
have the book Framed Woman in the Family Court Underworld. So yeah.
Yes, which we have talked about on this podcast before. All right, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. I'm going to close
Thank
with
you.
some other thoughts, but I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Have
All
a
right.
wonderful day. Bye.
Bye. Okay, I'm going to wrap this podcast episode up myself by just saying this. First of all, that was incredible. I think it's one of the most power packed interviews I feel like I have had in a long time. And yeah, I hope that I will definitely put all of her links in the show notes so that you can check it out. I definitely plan on checking out that professionals training. And I just wanted to say too, for those of you who are parents, moms, and you are dealing with this, and if you had those thoughts in the back of your mind that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, like I feel like I get triggered. I don't know how I can show up to be that kind of parent when I feel like I am constantly feeling dysregulated. Part of that is if you're still in your abusive relationship, it is really challenging. It's like it's like being in a house that's on fire. How can you heal or heal from your burns if you're actually living in the house that's just constantly causing burns all over your body, right? You need to get out of the house first of all, and then you need to be in an ICU for a while, and you need to get those burns treated. And while your burns are being treated, if someone comes in to visit you and they tickle you with a feather, you are going to scream out in pain. That's just the way it is when we're healing from abuse. However, people do heal from it. I've been working with women for almost a decade now, helping them to walk through that process. I wrote this book called All the Scary Little Gods. And eventually, here, maybe even by the time this episode is released, I'm going to be offering that book free, the Audible version of it free for anyone who wants to listen to it. And then I've put together a framework that basically takes all the epiphanies or the major shifts that I had to make in my mind in order to move from being this little girl who believed completely different than who I am now to being who I am now, to being an adult woman who believes very differently and experiences life in a very different way. And I wanted, I wrote my story to show that, because so many women have written to me and said, that's my story, what you wrote. But also because it took me many, many years to walk through that process, I want to make it possible through the Flying Free program and through the framework that I've created for women to be able to walk through that process in a shorter amount of time and in a more profound way than I was able to do that. Okay. So that it doesn't have to take so much time. It doesn't have to take so much money going to therapy, for example. It doesn't have to take so much emotional energy. You can actually create those brain shifts in your mind really within a year, within a year's time. And obviously, I'm still growing and changing. My life has changed a lot, even since I wrote that book and published it 2 years ago. A lot of things have happened since that time. I've gotten divorced again. Some very unexpected things have happened in my life in the last 2 years. And yet, so I'm only saying that to say that we continue to grow and change. We continue to see things we didn't see before. We continue to have to navigate life and make decisions and come up against challenges. And that's never going to change. But the version of me today that has been able to face those hurdles is a very different version of me than I was 10 years ago when I went through this the first time. Actually, it was a little bit longer ago than that. So that's what I'm saying. And the amount of time that it took for me to make some big decisions this last year was a matter of weeks instead of years. I would say the same amount of years that it took to make a decision several years ago is how many weeks it took for me to make a decision this time around. And that is only because I'm a different person. I think differently. I feel differently in my body. I'm showing up differently in my life. And that's what I want to help you with. So if you're interested in doing that work with me, you can go to joinflyingfree.com and complete an application. That application will help you kind of see if, and the page, the information page will help you see if this is for you or not. Are you ready for this kind of work? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But if you are, I'd love to have you join us. All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Until then, fly free.